Dear students, let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 18th October 2016. The first article is related to the outcomes of the the BRICS summit and BIMSTEC outreach. Now, what was the objective of the BRICS when it was established? And the BRICS summit at Goa, is it in alignment with those objectives? Is India tried to push hard its cross-border terrorism agenda on the BRICS? So, in this scenario, let's try to answer these questions. Now, the BRICS has no geographical continuity. It is made on a ground that these economies are strong and emerging and they are promising for the global growth. On that basis, the BRICS was built in. It wants to create an alternative financial architecture for the development. So here, BRICS is talking about new rating agency, new development bank, and also free trade agreement. But however, there is a lot of inequality among the BRICS nations, and more than half of the total size of the economy of the BRICS is occupied by the China. And with regard to the alignment, the China and Russia are now closely aligned, and the remaining countries are democratic nations, and there is other forum for them that is called IBSA. So, in the Goa summit, there are certain the strong outcomes for India. Prime Minister, in the presence of the Chinese Premier Xi Jinping, has called the Pakistan as mothership for terrorism. And also, the terrorism it is exporting is ultimately going to affect itself. And second is, though he did not name the Pakistan, he said that among the BIMSTEC countries and South Asian nations, only one country that is exporting the terrorism and causing the destability and moving away from the economic prosperity of the region. So, the China gave a different reaction to this. Today, the China has said the Pakistan sacrifices need to be realized in fight against the terrorism. Now, China also sees the Pakistan as a victim of terrorism rather than being a promoter of the terrorism. Now, the Russia is also coming close to the Pakistan as India appeared moving close to the United States of America. So, it has conducted the joint exercises, and though not confirmed, it is said that there are $2 billion deals, defense deals between Russia and Pakistan, and Rahil Sharif has visited even the Russia to conclude these deals. That was the information. And in this scenario, it appeared that the economic situation of Russia might be a reason for this. So India wants to balance this and bring back the direction to the India-Russia relations. So here, with regard to Russia, India has signed a buying of some critical defense equipments. So, S-400 Triumph air defense missile systems, and second, Kamo T-220T multi-utility helicopters, and also we are reviving the development of fifth generation fighter jet which we initiated and installed in between, and we are buying 4 stealth frigates from Russia. And Russia is bound to come back as the largest India's defense partner. Now, it is not the Modi's fault. From very PV Narasimha Rao days itself, India is looking for the diversification of its arms import. Now, the Modi government, it wants to build the military industrial complex in India itself. That's why this offset clause is being made compulsory. So, this particular multi-utility helicopters, the Kamo, these are going to be built in India and technology is going to be transferred by Russia for India. And another situation is the Russian weapons are much cheaper, but getting the spares is very difficult now, because most of the imports India made are of USSR times. And after breakdown of the USSR, the defense establishments they got distributed between the countries. Though there is an agreement among these partners, but however, getting the spares is a major difficulty for India. But however, India is able to assure Russia that it is the strategic partner. And on China, especially in UN Security Council, When India wanted to declare Mr. Mohammad Azhar as the global terrorist, it has kept a technical hold. And India wants to bring Mohammad Azhar to the justice for parliamentary attack and also attack on the Pathankot air base. But however, China did not leave its ground on the matter over here. And BIMSTEC outreach. Now you have to see it from the Uri attack perspective. And India has started isolating the Pakistan diplomatically. So if you talk about G20 summit, ASEAN summit in Laos, and even in Venezuela with regard to non-aligned movement, India's tone is very much consistent with the Pakistan's terror agenda, or India's tone is against the Pakistan terror agenda. So, India has taken a diplomatic offensive against the cross-border terrorism. So, to that extent, India's priorities are getting redefined. And the SARC summit, it was withdrawn because of non-participation of the members. The reason being the cross-border terrorism, and Bangladesh reason being interference of the Pakistan in its internal matters. Ms. Sheikh Hasina has clearly stated that Pakistan's parliament's objections to the International War Tribunal's proceedings in Bangladesh is the reason why it is not willing to attend the SARC summit being held in Islamabad. Now, alternate to this, India to move forward with the regional connectivity plan, it has created BBIN, which stands for Bangladesh, Bhutan, India and Nepal. And also BIMSTEC is another forum where 5 members of the SARC, they are represented in BIMSTEC. So in this scenario, India, what China is for BRICS, it means China is the biggest partner. If you take the BIMSTEC, its total economy is 2.5 trillion, where 75% belongs to India. Total population is 1.5 billion, where 1.2 billion belongs to India. So in that context, what we can say is the BIMSTEC, India has got a prominent space. And it is more technological and economic cooperation organization. A permanent secretariat is going to come up in Bangladesh, and a kind of movement has occurred which did not happen in the last 20 years. So, the BIMSTEC, is it becoming an alternative for SARC is the major question over here. But however, BIMSTEC has its own challenges. If you see, in Myanmar, the Muslims, that is, they are called Rohingya Muslims. This is a dispute between Myanmar and Bangladesh. Myanmar do not recognize these Rohingyas as its own people, and they are seen as people who came for better prospects for living in Myanmar, and their origins are they are ethnically belong to Bangladesh. And second is Nepali refugees in Bhutan, and the border dispute between Myanmar and Thailand. So these countries have their own disputes between them. So to what extent it can move forward is the major question. Now coming to court orders and reluctant governments. So let me ask you one question. The court, when it has given its judgment, if the governments do not follow the same, what is the leverage the courts enjoy in those circumstances? One is contempt of court. The second one is the failure of constitutional machinery. It can declare the constitutional machinery as a failure. And so, the second thing is ultimately an executive decision. And if you take the first thing, contempt of court, it is in the discretion of the judiciary. So, the problem in issuing the contempt of the court when the courts do not follow the judgment of it are the government is an enormous or amorphous entity, and the governments, they come and go. Our political parties occupying the government, they come and go. So who shall be held responsible? Now in this context, what the article argues is, whenever law is not being followed by the government, it leads to anarchy. So the officers and the government, the specific individuals in the government, shall be held responsible for implementing the court's orders. If they fail, the contempt of court can be issued for them rather than to the government. In that way, the personal responsibility can be fixed with regard to the following of the court orders to uphold the rule of law. That is the essence of this article. Nuclear triad. What do you mean by a nuclear triad? So let us see it this way. Now, the ability to fire a nuclear weapon from the land, air, and sea. This is what we call it as nuclear triad. Already we have the ability to fire it from the land, and then so once the Rafale has come up and Meteor missiles come up, we have ability to fire it from the skies, and now India also able to fire it from the seas. So, India has an indigenously developed nuclear submarine that is called INS Arihant. So, this INS Arihant is being fixed with the Sagarika missiles, which are nuclear capable. So, it makes India to complete its nuclear triad. And why is this important? There is a nuclear doctrine for India. According to that, India shall not go for the first use, or it is called no first use policy. And India also has no use policy against the non-nuclear weapon nations. Whenever we have no first use policy, obviously we shall strengthen our second strike capability. If our nuclear establishments on the ground are destroyed, we can use air power or the power under the seas to fire at the attacking country. If you take the Pakistan, it do not have its no first use policy, and it always trying to threaten us, saying it will not hesitate to use its nuclear weapons. And recently, if you see the Defense Minister of Pakistan's statement, he said that the nuclear weapons are not decorative. If you want to face these situations, we need to have the second nuclear strike capability. The nuclear triad brings the same. Now, coming to the personal laws. Now, in India, with regard to the criminal laws, we have a unified codified law. But in the case of the civil laws, that is inheritance of the property, marriage and divorce, succession, guardianship, etc., every religion is guided by its own personal law. So, because of this, there is no uniformity of the laws. So, in this context, the Uniform Civil Code is aimed at bringing in a common codified law involving the civil aspects of the life. So, what are the arguments for this? Especially the minorities argue that it is violation of the pluralistic culture of the country, and also it is an interference into their religious matters, because the personal law is seen as flowing from religious texts and preachings of various leaders of the religion. So, what the others argue is, in India, no religion is sanctified or giving space for the gender equality. So, if you want to bring in gender justice, gender equality, and dignity for women, we have to provide a uniform law with these principles. And second is, a uniform codified law brings in one nation, one law. So, obviously, implementation of the law becomes easy. And the third thing is, in a country such as India, existence of these multiple laws is not strengthening the bond of Indianness. So, and added to that, the personal laws, these are the different interpretations of the clergy. There exist different interpretations for the same. But however, only one interpretation is given a sanction against the other interpretations. If you take the triple talaq, halala, polygamy, there are many interpretations in the Quran itself, for the Quran itself. But however, only one interpretation that has more with male privilege is given the primacy. So, in this context, if you take the Brunda Karat's article, what she says is, uniformity necessarily does not mean equality. So, what is this? Now, how you define the uniformity, that it will define the gender equality. So, if you take Hindu Succession Act or Hindu Guardianship Act, though the law is codified, there is no equal status for the women granted across these laws. And the second thing, what Habibullah says is this. He is a retired civil servant. He also functioned as Central Information Commissioner. So, what he says is this. Now, instead of going for uniform civil code, it is better to reform the religions internally. So, in this context, he has explored the judgment during the Rajiv Gandhi era. That is called Shah Bano judgment. So, Miss Shah Bano, she was the wife of Mr. Ahmad Khan, the lawyer and a wealthy man based in Indore in Madhya Pradesh. Now, at the age of 65, he has divorced Miss Shah Bano, and he married to an younger girl. And according to the religion, he argued that that is allowed, and he need not pay any alimony to the Shah Bano for her maintenance. Then High Court has ordered that he is bound to pay under Section 125 of the IPC, that is CRPC. So it was also upheld by the Supreme Court. Then All India Muslim Personal Law Board, it has asked the intervention of the government. At that point of time, the Minister for Minorities, Mr. Arif Muhammad Khan, was very progressive and said that this judgment of the Supreme Court shall not be intervened by the government. And also, Mr. Habibullah has suggested to the Prime Minister that the court judgment shall not be intervened by the government. It is better to suggest to the clergy to apply the review petition in the court. But however, the politics of the day played the role. And finally, a law was enacted by the parliament through intervention of the government. That is, the protection of women, the protection of Muslim women, or Muslim Women Protection of Rights from Divorce Act. What this essentially says is, the responsibility of the maintenance of the woman belongs to her relatives. So there is, after the divorce, there is a period called Iddat. So it means during that Iddat period, I think it's for 3 months. So Iddat period, the man is responsible for maintaining the woman. After this period has ended, she becomes the responsibility of the relatives, who also gets the right over her property. And if the relatives do not take the responsibility, it is the Waqf board which has to take the responsibility. That is what is the essence of this act. So many people see the politics of the day have lost the greatest opportunity to reform Indian laws towards the gender justice. So that is what is these things talk about. So finally, my conclusion is this: religion and politics shall be separate from each other. If the politics tries to manipulate the religion for its advantage, that is detrimental to the national interest at any point of time. And then, uniform civil code and gender equality, they are not essentially one and the same. If you see the various reports, yesterday also, the Pritam Raj's report of Ministry of Women and Child Welfare, she has said that the uniform civil code need not necessarily bring in gender equality. So they have to be seen as two different aspects. So the religion has to be reformed towards the gender equality. That's what she says about. So, and again, if you observe the previous articles, let us reform every religion towards certain set ideals. And then, once the people start living with this, then automatically, at some point of time, a stage will be set for uniform civil code. Without preparing the ground for uniform civil code, bringing it or imposing it might alienate the minorities. Now, finally, the NGOs. Now, you know that Government of India, it has kept 21 NGOs under the prior watch list. So, what does that mean? Any funds received by these or any funds transferred by these international NGOs have to be given permission by the Ministry of Home Affairs first. One among them is Compassion International, an US-based NGO which wants to transfer the funds to 125 NGOs in India. And in this case, and most of these NGOs are being excluded from Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. What this law says, any of the NGO or any entity in India, if it is receiving greater than 10 lakhs of rupees from outside, it shall have the certificate from the Ministry of Home Affairs under the FCRA Act. But for many of the NGOs, this certificate has been cancelled by Home Ministry, citing the reason as their work is not in the national interest. And in this context, the major objection against the Compassion International is that they are using the funds for religious conversions. So these are the issues which are there. So finally, in the Secretary of the State, Mr. Kerry, when he visited India, and he has put a strong word for the Compassion International. So that's why now the Compassion International is expected to go out of this prior watch list. So these are the articles for today. And thank you very much. All the best.